Um, we currently have with us the executives, the rep of the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Professor Tekyiwaa. Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you agree with the assertion that social sector spending is poorly targeted, hence the poor are benefiting much less than they're supposed to?
Well, let me say that, first of all, I think social sector spending is not enough, okay? I don't think that we have prioritized social sector spending sufficiently. And therefore, when you don't have much to spend, however you target it, there won't be much to go around. I think that we have focused very much in the last few years on economic growth, that there's a lot of growth going around. But the problem is that it has not translated into people's lives. And the proportion of money that actually goes into the social sectors is not enough. So that's my starting point, that the quantum is not enough. Then there is the issue about targeting, what you have, who is actually getting it.
Excuse me, repeating that again. There was some noise, some siren. Take the second point.
Yeah, so I was saying that I don't believe that we're spending enough on the social sector. And secondly, what we spend may not be reaching the poorest. But this morning we heard a bit about social investments, and from the position of the ECA, I'm actually director of the Social Development Policy Division at the ECA, and we have been looking at human exclusion in Africa, which countries are the most inclusive, which ones are not so inclusive, etc. And we're finding some really surprising results. And one of the new projects that we're just embarking upon is actually monitoring beginning to monitor social expenditure or social investment in Africa. I think that the proportion of actual expenditure on health, on education, on social services is really poor. It's small, it's too low. It's not going to make the change, So I think that we need to be careful. There are a lot of views about targeting, whether because when you're targeting, who are you really targeting? Who are the poor? This morning we had figures, in Ghana, 74,000 families are being reached, Are they the very poorest? And even if you did that, would that result in an eradication of poverty? So we want to do this monitoring of social investments, because there are some things that may not be targeted but still reach a lot of poor people. There are other things that can be targeted. And I believe that Africa has a lot to learn from Latin America, which has done a lot in social protection. I don't think that we have enough robust social protection policies. Look at something like school feeding here in Ghana. It is a form of social protection, but we are dependent on donors for funding it, and there is always a problem about cost, how the operators really get the money. So how many children are being reached? Are these the hungriest children? Are they the neediest children, etc.? And to target properly, you have to have a system of national identification, all kinds, a very robust data system, so that you know who, where, and who the poor are in your country and how you're targeting them. And sometimes I believe that broad social programs can do a lot to reach the poorest than even targeted programs. So you have to do a combination of different programs, yeah.
You started with the explanation of what we can do. Can you further give us much more what we can do to improve the sector?
Well, I think that we need to, first of all, actually find out just how much are we spending. If we asked anybody in several African countries, what is the totality of your social investment portfolio? How much are you spending, on different categories of people, children, disabled people, the elderly, etc. So we need to have a lot more data, and then we also need to find out who it is reaching. You can't just come and have a checklist, do this, do that. I think that you need to get the data from each country to find out how much they are spending and who they are reaching, and then be able to make some interventions from there. So this is what part of this study aims to do, to actually do some studies in different regions across Africa to be able to measure, because sometimes there may be social spending which does not come directly as social spending, but which still has an impact on reducing poverty. And we need to really be able to measure all these different components, and also to find out just how many people are being reached. So maybe you have cash transfers which are going to 74,000 families, and families comprise of 3 or 4 people each or even more. And yet beyond the cash transfers, there may be other elements of social spending or social investment that reach families. So in some countries, it may be that they are undercounting, and in other countries, maybe but the point that I'm making is that the level of need and what we spend is not commensurate. Yeah.
On a much lighter note, what are your impressions of today's program?
Well, we've just started. This morning we heard the president, we heard the expressions of goodwill from different organizations. We have a crowded program. I think that the issues are important for Africa's future. They need to be tackled. I think that we have very many unacceptable results. One of the studies that we have done in the ECA is this study called the Cost of Hunger in Africa studies. And Ghana, we did it in 4 countries before, in Egypt, Ethiopia, Swaziland, and Uganda. And there are 8 more countries where the studies are going on, including in Ghana. Now, in fact, this week we're launching the study in Africa. But let me just read some of the findings from the first phase of the Cost of Hunger in Africa study. And it's saying that today there are more stunted children in Africa than there were 20 years ago. Another of the findings is that 40 to 60% of working age populations suffered from stunting as children. And also that the annual costs associated with child undernutrition reach values equivalent to 1.9 to 16.5% of gross domestic product. This is shocking, because on the other hand, you would think that we're making progress. So if we're making progress, why are we coming up with such shocking indicators and like that? And I think that often until we do the studies, we underestimate the severity of the problem. So we're tackling a lot of issues. This morning we heard a lot about wealth inequality. If we think of, for instance, the population of youth in our countries and the levels of unemployment among the youth, it is certainly a cause of worry, And if we don't tackle that, we will be widening inequality. So one of the, if you like, the contradictions of what has happened recently is that we have had economic growth, but this growth has not resulted in increased employment of youth. It has not really resulted in increased levels of social well-being. These are all concerns, and I am hopeful that over the next 3 days we're going to have very useful deliberations, and even better that the deliberations will not just end here, but will inform policy and action that they will lead to implementable results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you.
We are grateful for your time.
Thank you.